The galaxy had always laughed at humanity. From the distant empires of stars we had never touched to the warlords of blackened worlds, every alien intelligence had treated us like a curious joke. Primitive, fragile, fleeting. They whispered about our short lives and our fragile cities, about our fragile blue planet spinning alone in the dark. They mocked our struggles, our ambitions, and our stubborn, reckless hope. Yet, in the quiet corners of the universe where no one thought we could reach, humanity was quietly preparing. For centuries, our scientists, engineers, and explorers had studied the cosmos, learning its rhythms, decoding its secrets. The galaxy never noticed. We were too small, too disorganized, too human. But the thing about humanity is that we survive. We adapt. We fight, even when the odds are absurd, even when the universe itself seems to sneer at our existence. And that fight, that relentless drive, had transformed us. Not just our technology, not just our ships, but our very spirit. At the heart of this story are the warships, colossal, terrifying, and unlike anything the galaxy had seen. They were not mere vessels of destruction. They were monuments to human ingenuity, courage, and stubborn defiance. Each one carried thousands of souls, hearts beating in rhythm with engines that could carve paths between the stars. They represented everything humanity had ever endured: famine, disease, war, loss, hope. And they were ready to make the galaxy remember us. In the great voids between worlds, rumors began to spread among the star empires. Whispers of strange lights moving faster than thought, of armadas appearing from nowhere, of human warships capable of surviving battles that would have obliterated entire fleets. The laughter that had greeted humanity for eons began to falter. Curiosity replaced amusement. Unease replaced certainty. And somewhere in the high councils of alien worlds, fear was quietly blooming. Our commanders, though few in number, understood what was at stake. They knew that every decision, every trajectory plotted through the void, would determine whether humanity remained the galaxy's forgotten joke or became the galaxy's reckoning. The tension was unbearable, electric. Even among ourselves, we could feel it. Our triumphs were shadowed by the unknown, by enemies we barely understood and worlds we could not predict. And then, as our warships emerged from the outer reaches of a star system long abandoned, the first salvos of the confrontation crackled across communications channels. The galaxy, for the first time, stopped laughing. But even as we braced for battle, even as our engines hummed with the promise of glory, a shadow loomed. A force the galaxy itself had never recorded. Something vast, something ancient, something watching our every move. No one knew if we were ready, and as the first stars disappeared behind the dark hulls of our fleet, the question burned across every mind aboard. Could humanity survive what was coming? Or had we just painted a target across the universe? The warships drifted silently in the void, their dark hulls absorbing the dim glow of distant stars. Inside, the crew moved with quiet precision, each person a link in a chain that carried the weight of humanity's survival. Some had grown up hearing stories of the galaxy's laughter, of alien empires that crushed lesser species without a second thought. Others had never known fear outside the walls of their own worlds. Yet all shared the same burning question. What waited for them beyond the edge of known space? The fleet's commanders gathered in the observation decks, staring at the starfield that stretched endlessly ahead. Even among the most experienced, there was a sense of unease that refused to be named. Reports from scouts were incomplete. Scans of the systems ahead returned anomalies, distortions in space-time that no human technology had encountered before. Signals came and went without pattern, and the faintest traces of alien fleets hinted at forces far older and more organized than anything humanity had faced. One of the youngest pilots, still new enough to be haunted by excitement as much as fear, whispered across the comm channel about a strange formation of light, shapes that didn't obey the usual rules of movement. The older officers exchanged tense glances. "Not all of it can be alien fleets," one said quietly. "Some of it might be something else." The uncertainty hung in the air, heavier than the vacuum outside. Each human aboard carried their own private history, memories of loss, of worlds they had left behind, of people they could never see again. Those memories shaped the way they saw the fleet, the battles they imagined, and the galaxy that had mocked them for centuries. Some clung to hope as if it were a lifeline. Others relied on sheer will, a stubborn insistence that humanity was more than its failures. Together they formed a force that no one, not even the most powerful empires, could easily dismiss. As the fleet moved deeper into uncharted territory, strange signals began to appear in their sensors, pulses that didn't match any known technology, patterns that seemed almost alive. Some crew members swore they could hear whispers in the static of their comm lines, fleeting voices that disappeared before they could respond. No one knew if it was enemy interference, a natural phenomenon, or something altogether different. It didn't matter. Every strange signal reminded them that the universe they had entered was nothing like the one they thought they understood. The commanders debated strategies in low, urgent voices. Should they push forward at full speed, risking ambushes from unseen forces? Or should they wait, letting the unknown shape the battlefield before committing fully? Every choice carried risk, every hesitation could cost lives. And above it all, the shadow that had been following them since the first jump seemed to loom closer, like a predator circling, patient and infinite. Even as tension grew, humanity's ingenuity showed itself in quiet ways. Engineers adjusted shields, pilots practiced evasive maneuvers, and communications officers tried to decipher the strange signals. Each small success, each tiny breakthrough, reminded the crew that they were not helpless. Yet the larger question remained unanswered. When the first real confrontation came, would all their skill and courage be enough to survive what waited in the darkness? Somewhere in the distance, the void itself seemed to pulse with anticipation. The stars trembled at the edges of their sensors. Humanity's warships were moving forward, unstoppable in their resolve, yet unaware of the force that watched, measured, and waited for the perfect moment to strike. And in that silence, in that dark expanse, the galaxy held its breath. The fleet crept closer to the edge of the unknown system, where gravity wells twisted light and sensors struggled to make sense of the void. Each ship carried its own stories, its own fears, yet all were bound by the same unspoken truth. Humanity was no longer just surviving. It was on the verge of challenging the galaxy itself. Some in the crew whispered about what had come before them, rumors of civilizations that had vanished without warning, swallowed by forces the stars themselves seemed to protect. Others dismissed it, clinging to the belief that humanity's will could bend even the oldest laws of the cosmos. On board one of the largest warships, the communications officer struggled to decode a fragmented transmission intercepted earlier. The signal carried no recognizable language, only tones that shifted like waves, almost musical, almost alive. "It's like it's thinking," the officer muttered, eyes wide as she tried to make sense of the patterns. Around her, other crew members felt the same unease, a creeping certainty that the universe was watching more closely than they had imagined. Meanwhile, the younger pilots trained relentlessly, maneuvering through simulated ambushes that mirrored the strange patterns their sensors had picked up. Some thrived under the pressure, their reflexes sharpening with each run, while others faltered, haunted by images of fleets vaporized before they even realized they were under fire. The commanders noticed the strain, but they also recognized a spark, a stubborn human spark that no simulation could erase. These were the moments that defined them, the moments that would shape the battles to come. Down in the engine decks, Mechanics whispered about anomalies they could feel in the vibrations of the ships themselves. "It's like the hull is tense," one said, running her hands along the metal. "Like it knows something's out there." Engineers shared nervous glances, but there was no room for doubt or delay. Every adjustment mattered. A single miscalculation could mean disaster when the first engagement finally arrived. Outside, the darkness seemed to thicken. Stars shimmered unnaturally, and strange pulses rippled through space, bending trajectories and confusing even the most advanced targeting systems. Scouts reported fleeting glimpses of shadowed forms moving with impossible speed, disappearing before identification could be confirmed. The tension was no longer contained within the ships. It had spilled into the void itself, stretching across millions of kilometers like an invisible wire ready to snap. Even as the fleet prepared for combat, personal dramas unfolded among the crew. Some struggled with fear, some with loss, and some with the crushing weight of responsibility. Every decision, every hesitation, felt amplified by the unknown forces pressing closer. The galaxy's laughter, once distant and mocking, now felt like a heartbeat they could sense but not hear, constant, watchful, patient. And then, through the hum of the engines and the chatter of anxious crew, a single alert cut through the tension. An object larger than any scout or vessel yet detected was approaching. Its size alone distorted their sensors, but the readings suggested intelligence, movement, and intent. The fleet froze, engines throttled, hearts racing. Humanity's warships, magnificent and defiant, now faced something that no one had anticipated. And there was no manual, no protocol that could prepare them for what came next. In that moment, the crew understood the truth they had always feared but never admitted. The galaxy was about to answer their defiance, and whatever waited in the darkness was not here to negotiate. The approaching shadow grew larger with each passing minute, swallowing starlight and warping the sensors in ways no human mind had prepared for. The fleet's warships, massive and gleaming despite the darkness, began to shift into formation, engines humming like restless predators. Every crew member could feel it. This was no ordinary encounter. This was a test the galaxy had been waiting to impose, a moment that would decide whether humanity remained a curiosity or became a force to be reckoned with. On the bridge of the flagship, the lead commander traced the outline of the shadow across the star charts, every flick of the hand accompanied by a tightening in the chest. Pilots gripped their controls harder, their knuckles white. Every system was online, every weapon primed, yet the uncertainty gnawed at them. No simulation had prepared them for this. No training could erase the knowledge that whatever waited beyond their sensors was bigger, smarter, and stranger than anything humanity had ever faced. Down in the lower decks, the engineers worked feverishly, stabilizing reactors and adjusting shields against strains they couldn't fully predict. "Hull integrity at 98%, one shouted. "Fluctuations rising, getting erratic." Every vibration of the ship felt amplified, every hum of the engines a heartbeat of fear and anticipation. In that moment, the crew realized that survival would demand more than courage. It would demand ingenuity, trust, and an unbreakable will. Meanwhile, the younger pilots in the flight bays struggled with their own dread. They had been trained for evasive maneuvers, dogfights, and even boarding actions against alien vessels. But the approaching entity defied all rules. It moved with a fluidity that suggested intelligence, yet it was vast, almost planetary in scale. One pilot muttered under his breath, "It's like it knows what we're thinking before we even do." Others didn't respond, focusing instead on their instruments, hearts pounding with anticipation of the confrontation they couldn't yet see. Even among the fleet's commanders, disagreements flared. Some argued for a preemptive strike to test the limits of their weapons and reveal weaknesses. Others urged caution, warning that one wrong move could trigger a response that no human technology could withstand. Every suggestion carried the weight of lives, of civilizations, of the fragile reputation humanity had fought so hard to earn. Outside, the shadow loomed closer. Pulses of energy flickered across the void like ripples on a black ocean. Sensors detected distortions, sudden shifts that made targeting nearly impossible. Every crew member felt the tension in their bones, a vibration that was more than just the engines. It was the universe itself pressing against them, daring humanity to act. Then the first anomaly pierced the darkness, a flash of movement faster than thought, slicing between the fleet like a blade of light. Alarms screamed, consoles flared, and every eye in the fleet trained on the void. The unknown force was not passive. It was aware, deliberate, testing humanity as much as humanity tested it. The fleet braced for impact, knowing that what came next would not just decide the outcome of a single battle, but the very place of humanity among the stars. In every corridor, on every deck, the same thought ran through human minds. This was it. The galaxy's laughter had stopped, replaced by a silence that carried the weight of destiny. And somewhere deep in the darkness, something waited, patient, immense, and unstoppable. The first clash was imminent, and humanity's warships, magnificent and defiant, were poised on the edge of the unknown, ready to face whatever came, but not yet ready for the truth of what they had awakened. Just as the fleet braced for the first encounter, a pulse of energy rippled through the void, not from the approaching shadow, but from the very system they thought they controlled. The stars themselves seemed to shiver, bending and flickering in ways that defied all human understanding. The scanners went haywire, alerts flashed in every command center. And for the first time, the fleet realized that the danger was not only in front of them, it was everywhere. The lead commander slammed a fist against the console. "Status report." The officer's voice trembled, though she fought to keep calm. "Multiple anomalies detected. The system itself is unstable. Gravity fluctuations, temporal distortions. It's like the space between stars is alive." Every crew member froze, the weight of impossibility sinking in. Humanity had prepared for alien fleets, for intelligent attacks, but never for the universe itself to become an opponent. In the flight bays, pilots exchanged nervous glances. Their simulations had always assumed predictable physics, reliable trajectories, and calculable threats. Now, every instinct was useless. "This isn't just an ambush," one pilot whispered, voice tight. "The void. It's fighting us." The young pilot's words echoed through the bays, amplifying the tension that already thrummed through every hull and corridor. Below deck, engineers worked furiously, rerouting power to shields, stabilizing engines. But the anomalies were relentless. The very structure of the warships groaned, as if resisting the laws of reality around them. "Hull stress increasing exponentially," shouted one technician. "If this keeps up, we won't survive long enough to even fire a shot." Even the most seasoned veterans could feel the gravity of the moment pressing down. Human ingenuity, once thought limitless, was being tested in ways they had never imagined. Meanwhile, the shadow outside the system shifted, almost imperceptibly at first, then with sudden speed. It was no longer a single entity. Scanners revealed fragments, smaller, faster components breaking off and maneuvering independently. The fleet's sensors strained to track them, every reading twisting into confusion. The crew realized with mounting dread that this was not a simple enemy. It was a hive, a coordinated force that adapted faster than humanity could respond. On the observation deck, some of the older commanders exchanged grim looks. "We underestimated it," one said quietly, voice heavy with the realization. "We thought this was about human weapons, tactics, strategy. But it's something else entirely. It's evolution in motion, and we're its test." The words sank into the crew like ice water. They had faced impossible odds before, but never against something that seemed to anticipate their every move, something that could bend the universe itself to its advantage. In the corridors and decks below, the tension reached a breaking point. Families, losses, histories, all of it pressed into the minds of the crew. Every heart was pounding, every nerve stretched thin. Humanity had ventured into the stars to claim its place, to answer the galaxy's ridicule with defiance and skill. Now, the universe itself seemed to challenge them, twisting the rules, testing the limits of courage, ingenuity, and endurance. And then the final alarm cut through the hum of the fleet. The first fragments of the shadow reached the outermost ships. Pulses of energy slammed against shields that had held against everything humanity had faced before. The impact was immediate, violent, and terrifying. The fleet shook as if the stars themselves had struck them. Humanity's warships were magnificent, relentless, and alive with the spirit of defiance. But this new threat had just made it clear that survival would demand more than courage. It would demand the impossible. The fleet shuddered under the relentless assault, shields flaring, engines screaming, as the shadow's fragments darted through the void with deadly precision. For a moment it seemed impossible. Humanity, brilliant as it was, might be swallowed by the very darkness it sought to challenge. But then something remarkable happened. The fleet, battered and exhausted, began to move not as individual warships, but as a single coordinated organism. Pilots, engineers, and commanders all found their rhythm, instinctively anticipating one another's moves. Humanity had adapted faster than the shadow could, and that adaptation became their greatest weapon. From the bridge of the flagship, the lead commander gave a calm, deliberate order. "Focus on the core. Concentrate fire on the central mass. Everything else is a distraction." The crew obeyed without hesitation, targeting the densest fragment of the shadow, their combined weapons forming a blazing lance of human ingenuity and courage. Energy beams cut through the darkness, and for the first time, the shadow recoiled, its movements faltering. Down in the engine rooms, technicians worked miracles under pressure, rerouting power to weapon systems while maintaining shields that were already at critical levels. "We can hold it," one engineer shouted over the alarms. "If we push all reserves to the core, we might just—" Her words were interrupted by another pulse of energy, this one stronger than anything before. It slammed into the flagship and alarms screamed as hull sections buckled. Yet humanity did not falter. Every hand, every mind, every heartbeat focused on one impossible goal: survival. Then came the moment of truth. The combined fire from the fleet pierced the shadow's core, illuminating the void with blinding light. The fragments wavered, then disintegrated into streams of shimmering energy. Humanity had done the unthinkable. They had turned back an enemy that seemed to warp reality itself. Cheering erupted across the fleet, voices trembling with disbelief, relief, and triumph. The galaxy had been watching, and for the first time, humanity had claimed its place not as a joke, but as a force to be reckoned with. But victory was fleeting. As the fleet celebrated, sensors picked up a new anomaly. At the very center of the system, hidden within the remnants of the shadow, a massive pulsing object began to take form. It was not a fragment, not a weapon. It was alive. It expanded, coalescing into a shape that seemed impossibly intelligent, aware of humanity's triumph. The realization struck the commanders and crews at the same time. Destroying the fragments had not ended the threat. It had awakened something far greater. The last moments of calm before the storm were electric. Pilots gripped their controls, engineers braced for impact, and the lead commander stared at the new entity forming in the void. Humanity had survived the first test, but the galaxy still held countless mysteries, and the greatest challenge was only just beginning. The stars, once indifferent, now seemed alive with anticipation. And in that moment, everyone understood that survival was no longer enough. Humanity would have to fight, think, and endure in ways it had never imagined, because the universe had more secrets to reveal, and the next move would determine the fate of not just one fleet, but an entire species. The fleet drifted in the aftermath of the battle, hulls scorched, engines humming weakly, but spirits unbroken. The shadow had dissolved, its fragments scattered across the void, leaving only the pulsing enigma at the center of the system. The crew, exhausted yet alive, moved cautiously, scanning, analyzing, and trying to make sense of what they had survived. For the first time, they realized that humanity had not merely fought to survive, they had proven themselves capable of standing against the impossible. On the flagship's bridge, the lead commander looked out at the stars, now peaceful, yet still tinged with the faint ripples of residual energy. The young pilot from the front lines leaned against the console, voice quiet but full of awe. We actually did it. We faced something no one else dared touch and lived." The words hung in the air, a quiet acknowledgement of the courage and ingenuity that had carried them through the storm. Back in the engine decks, engineers finally allowed themselves to breathe. The hum of the stabilizers and the flicker of the emergency lights felt almost like music after the chaos. "We pushed it as far as it could go," one technician said, wiping soot from her hands. "But the system, it's still alive. Whatever that thing is, it's not finished with us." There was no fear in her voice, only determination. Humanity had survived the first trial, and every soul on the fleet knew that their journey into the galaxy had only just begun. Across the ships, conversations were quiet, but full of meaning. Crewmates shared memories of the moments that had almost broken them, the choices that had saved them, and the realization that they had become something greater than any individual could be. Every officer, every pilot, every engineer carried with them a sense of unity, a feeling that they had touched the edge of something immense and emerged stronger. Humanity's resilience, ingenuity, and defiance had reshaped their place in the stars. The anomaly at the system's center remained, pulsing slowly, almost like it was studying them. Some feared it. Others wondered if it could be a guide, a force that would one day align with humanity instead of opposing it. The unanswered question lingered, but it no longer felt like a threat. Instead, it was a reminder that the galaxy was vast, unpredictable, and full of challenges, and that humanity, for all its fragility, had the courage to face them. As the fleet prepared to leave the system, the lead commander addressed the crews over the comms, voice steady, filled with pride. "We entered the unknown and proved ourselves. The galaxy laughed at us and we answered. Not with vengeance, but with courage. Remember this moment. Remember what it means to be human. Our warships may darken the stars, but it is our spirit that will light the way." The stars stretched endlessly ahead, glittering with possibilities. The fleet moved forward, engines glowing, a testament to humanity's determination, adaptability, and hope. The galaxy had changed, and so had humanity. One battle was over, but the story of their rise, their struggles, and their triumphs among the stars would continue. For now, they had survived. They had endured, and they had earned their place in the universe, not as observers, but as makers of their own destiny. The void was quiet, but it was no longer empty. Humanity had left its mark, and the galaxy, vast and eternal, would never forget.